than all of the wise men in all Babylon. I want you to get something. Daniel wasn't like born intelligent. It says God gave him wisdom and intelligence, and it's in the context that he also taught him how to understand visions and dreams. We're talking about, like, this is SQ. This guy had spiritual intelligence that he wasn't born with, that God gave to him, that he directed kings with. Maybe you're like, you know what, my IQ is 100. Well, you know what, who cares what your IQ is if you have high SQ? Because the Holy Spirit could tell you anything. I'm telling you, there are a lot of people running around, and it's like they're doing these amazing things, and you're like, man, that person didn't graduate from high school. In fact, they're not very smart, but they're doing this amazing stuff, and I'm convinced that a bunch of it is just the Holy Spirit giving them information. They don't know any more about that computer than the day before they got the information. All they know is exactly what the Holy Spirit gave them. They don't understand how the computer works. They don't understand how they couldn't program anything else. They couldn't do a simple program, but they did something that the programmer couldn't do because Holy Spirit knew how to do it. Are you following me? It's interesting because the word knowledge, and God gave them knowledge and intelligence. It's the Hebrew word, I'm sorry, it's M-A-D-D-A. I don't know how you pronounce that. But it's translated bedchamber one time and knowledge 5 times. And the reason is because the root word for that word M-A-D-D-A is the word yada. And yada is the word that was used when Adam, it says, now Adam had relations with his wife Eve. This is Genesis 4:1. That word relations, or some of it says, and Adam knew Eve. That's the word yada. What I'm getting at is this, is that the knowledge that Daniel had was coming from the bedchamber. Now, let me make it simple. The knowledge that Daniel had was directly related to intimacy with God. In other words, he had yada with God, and God was giving him information that the king needed. It wasn't that he was like so smart, he had high IQ, he's got Daniel had an IQ of 170. No, he slept with God. He had intimacy with God. He had yada with God, and in his intimacy with God, God would tell him what the king needed. How many of you understand you could graduate with a degree from Harvard, you can have a PhD, you can have an IQ of 170, but when the king has a dream, you still don't know what the dream is without the king telling you, unless you have high spiritual intelligence. Are you with me? Unless the Lord whispers to you in your bedchamber, you don't know what the king... Listen, you might be able to figure out what the dream means, but you don't know what the dream is without the Lord talking to you in your bedchamber. In your intimate times. Are you with me? And I want to end here for tonight. Jesus said in John 15, I no longer call you slaves, because the slave does not know what his master is doing. A slave does not know what his master is doing. But I call you friends. Get this. But I call you friends, for all things. Everybody say, all things. All things I have heard from the Father, I've made known to you. Now, what distinguishes me from a slave? How many of you know when you come to Christ, you're a slave? You were a slave to sin, now you're a slave to Christ. Now you're a slave to righteousness, right? So you start out as a slave, but what's the goal? The goal isn't to stay in slavery. The goal isn't to just, yes sir, no sir, I learned to obey God. That's awesome. But how about you become friends and you begin to dream with God? I don't mean dream about God, you begin to dream with God. You begin to have ideas with God. You begin to have ideas from God. And God begins to reveal all things. When I know that all things, it's like all spiritual things. He's going to tell me about every verse. Maybe that's what he meant. But I think he can tell you about how to fix cars, how to carve on silver and gold, how to fix computers. I think he can tell you all things. He's the master mechanic. He's the master craftsman. He's the master doctor. He's the great physician. He's the wise counselor. And what happens if you begin to tap into that other dimension? You begin, if you will, to have intimacy with God. And suddenly, this yada that you have with God gives you knowledge. With friendship with God, gives you revelation. And suddenly, it's no longer am I a slave, but I'm a friend. How do I know if I'm a friend with God? Because I know all things. I have access into a hard drive that the world doesn't have access to. And not only do I understand dreams and visions, but I have the wisdom to know what you should do about it. not only am I like Joseph, and I can tell you about your fat calves and skinny calves, but I also have wisdom to know what you should do about the mess that you're in. And I have the deepest sense that, like Joseph and Pharaoh, that Pharaoh is dreaming again. That Pharaoh is dreaming again. That, it's amazing to me that that Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Now, I don't know if this is accurate, but I kind of think that Nebuchadnezzar dreams all the time. Like, I know unbelievers dream all the time. I know, Nebuchadnezzar's dreaming all through the Bible. I just have a feeling that he's just a dreamer. But he has this dream. You remember the first dream he has? He has this dream about the statue. And then he has this other dream about this tree. And Pharaoh has a dream with Joseph. Pharaoh has a dream about 7 fat calves and 7 skinny calves, and the skinny calves ate the fat calves. Do you remember this? What's amazing to me, it says about Nebuchadnezzar, it says when Daniel comes in to interpret the dream about the statue, and the king says to his wise men, listen, you're going to tell me the dream, and you're going to tell me its interpretation. And if you don't, I'm going to kill you all. And by the way, you have till tonight. And they go, listen, king, no one's ever been asked to do this before. He goes, I don't give a rip what anyone's been asked to do before. If you don't tell me the dream and its interpretation, you're all dead. Listen, what does it take, just if you will, just think through this with me for a minute. What does it take to have a dream, but you're so convinced that your life is held in the balance of this dream? Like, whatever this dream means has everything to do with my kingdom, my future, the destiny of my children, that if I don't find out what this dream means, I might die. And I am so convinced that this dream I had last night, like I dreamt on Monday, I dreamt on Wednesday, I dreamt on Thursday, I dreamt on Saturday, but when I had this dream on Sunday, this dream, listen, I'm willing to kill all my wise men to get someone to answer this dream. I am convinced that this dream came from something divine. And Daniel walks into the king's chamber, at Nebuchadnezzar's chamber, and he says this, listen, king, here's your dream. And I want to tell you when you got it. You got this dream when you were asking yourself about the future. And you were wondering what was going to happen in the future. And when you were asking about what's going to happen in the future, you slipped into a dream. That's why you know that this dream is from the divine side. He doesn't know God yet, because you were questioning your future when you had the dream. How many know one way to tap in to spiritual intelligence is to begin to ask God questions? God, how about my future? How about my children? How about the future of my children? I think that the Lord wants to teach us all things. I think we limit ourselves by, let me just say this. I think we limit the word of knowledge, for example, to what we see other people using the word of knowledge, how the Holy Spirit uses the word of knowledge in church. And we've relegated it to the 4 walls of the church, and we wonder why we're not having impact on nations. When the same Holy Spirit who can tell us how to use this to have one effect, that same Holy Spirit can teach us how to use it to have another effect in government or in inventions and innovation, all kinds of things. I think that we're one revelation away from a changed economy. I think we're like in the days of Pharaoh and Joseph. We're one revelation away from avoiding a famine and slipping into the richest nation in the world. I think people are like, well, we need the debt to be paid off. I think we just need revelation. We just need a thought that's coming from another dimension to rewrite this program. Because the guy who wrote this program thinks it only has 3 price levels. But the guy who wrote the program knows how to get 5. Would you stand?